Good morning, everybody. Mark Clements, Artistic Director of Milwaukee Rep, continuing the What's the Tea series, where I interview a guest, and in this case, a series of guests today over the virtual kitchen table, over a cup of tea. Everybody's, I think, got prop in hand. I'm rocking a cup of British tea in my Christmas Carol mug. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to introduce you to the panel in no particular order, but Jacobo Lovo, who's the Managing Artistic Director of Latino Arts. Niehaus, President of Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. Maggey Oplinger, General Director and CEO of Florentine Opera. Kendra Ingram, who's the President, CEO of Marcus Performing Arts Center, and Michael Pink, the Artistic Director of Milwaukee Ballet. Thank you all so much for joining this morning. And we're doing something a little bit different here. This is the first What's the Tea that has had multiple guests. It's just been a solo conversation thus far. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking to everybody, getting responses about what's been going on and what their, the hopes for your organizations. We're all Milwaukee arts leaders of Milwaukee arts organizations. And I thought it'd be really useful to just get a general perspective on what has been going on as we deal with two pandemics in our country. The first being the COVID crisis, the pandemic, and where we are at, where we've been, where we're at, and where we hope to be going out of that. And also following the murder of George Floyd, the outcry and the public and national tragedy that we're going through with racial injustice in this country, which is affecting all of our organizations and, of course, our society to a great degree. So lots to discuss in the next 30 minutes. Let's go sort of dive in. Let's deal with the COVID crisis. I think my first question for you all is, what was happening? Maybe give a 2-minute overview on what was happening when you realized that you were suddenly going about your normal lives and then you had to pivot. What happened at that time? How did that go down? And how have you been keeping in touch with your stakeholders and your audiences during that time? Maggey, why don't you kick off with that?
Well, it was typically dramatic for the opera world. We were on the eve of a sold-out show, and we're really excited to bring Tragedy of Carmen to Milwaukee. Our cast had been working on it for weeks, and unfortunately, I got to meet Kendra that night. We hadn't had a chance to meet before that, but we could not go on with the performance just out of fear for everyone's safety. So after talking to a lot of the organizations on this call, we did talk to some fantastic partners, Kickball Media and Studio Gear, and they helped us do a 3-camera recording of that show so that we could at least share it with our audience, which I think was very rewarding, not only for the audience, but also for our performers who had worked so hard on putting the show together. And, opera is grand in scale in every way. We have a lot of people on stage, backstage, hopefully in the audience. So working through the kinks of what that's going to look like going forward is challenging. But we have Opera Book Club on Wednesdays. And one of the things we've noticed is that there's so many operas and there's so few operas done every season by any company, comparatively to the Symphony, for example, that it gives people a chance to get to know the repertoire a little bit and in a playful way. So we're kind of talking about the soap opera that goes on around operas as they've been created, as they've been performed, a little bit artistic, a little bit of biography, and we keep them short and sweet and they're fun. And we have the very good fortune of having our Baumgartner studio artists coming back because they live together. So we've been working really hard on quarantining them into a house together, and they should be here by late July. And we are really excited to work with them and have our performers in a safe space together where we're following all medical protocols, but because they live and work together, we can at least have all of them in the same room. So that will be really exciting.
Thank you, Maggey. Jacobo, what's been happening with you since this all kicked off?
I think after the initial jolt of oh my goodness, it's kind of subsides. We were able to pivot fairly quickly to online programming. Fortunately for us, when the quarantine took place, we were kind of like coming off kind of the height of some of programming that was just wrapping up. So we had to cancel minimal programming. Aside from some workshops and some school visits, we were able to keep everything else pretty much going steadily. So the way we were staying active and engaged in our community has been through online tutorials. They are culturally relevant and very easy to do for anybody that wants to engage in art making activities, being creative at home. We started a series on Facebook Live called Staying Creative at Home with Minimal Art Supplies, and we've been hosting those tutorials also on a YouTube channel that we created as a response to the whole COVID-19 situation. So we've been kind of offering programming to the community for them to have that artistic, that creative outlet during quarantine, and they're all family friendly. And like I said, they're using minimal art supplies, so kind of like literally walked around my house, stayed outside of my art studio because I have an obscene amount of art supplies in there. So I had to kind of like think, well, if somebody's going to be doing art at home, what are they going to have available to them? So we tried having all the art supplies be minimal in nature. So we've been staying connected to the community like that with our stakeholders. Constant communication with our board. We've been able to hold all our board meetings and so on. But just looking for ways to stay connected with the community has been key. Now, as we start approaching kind of the middle of summer and start looking down the line, that's where the anxiety is really setting in. I had set a deadline for myself to assess what contracts I would be issuing out for the fall programming in the next week. And so now I'm going to have to really kind of sit down and take a really close look at all the safety mandates. We have been putting plans into play, like Plan A, Plan B, as to how we would welcome people back into our space safely. And we've been piloting a few, but as of this point, we're really kind of like in a holding pattern about programming for the fall. Now, this week we did actually welcome some people into the gallery, and some of the things that we've been doing is by registration only, using our ticketing service online. So we're trying to do the responsible thing and make sure that people are safe along with our staff, but trying to experiment with how are we able to open responsibly.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to dive into that with everybody, giving, that we don't have a crystal ball right now, and the news seems to change on the day. And one of the things we've had to be is pretty dexterous and nimble in terms of how we navigate. What seemed a brilliant idea that we put a lot of planning into a week ago is then suddenly redundant. So I'd love to talk to you guys all about that and, the next steps. Also, as I read every day about schools, schools coming back, it's just going to impact whether they're coming back in what form. It's going to really impact all of these plans as well. It seems to me until we're in some state there that we're in this holding pattern. Kendra, I think you're the newest person on the block, right? I mean, how long have you been in post?
My first day on the job was March 9.
Wow.
And in 5 days, we shut down the venue. So yeah, my first day was March 9. My first meeting of my first day was determining what we were planning to do with our Broadway performance the following week. And speaking with our Broadway partners. By Thursday of that week, I had spoken to my colleagues here on the panel today about whether or not we'd be shutting down the venue for the next few weeks. by Friday of that week, I was attending Maggey's most, light audience, special invited audience of her recording of Tragedy of Carmen. And the last performance, live performance that I have seen was the Milwaukee Symphony live streaming their performance on Eline Hall stage on March 14th. So by March 16, we decided to close the venue, and we've been closed since. Talking about, thinking about what we've been doing to stay engaged with our audiences. Like a lot of my colleagues on the panel today, we've been doing a lot of virtual programming. We typically would have family programming at our kids' stage outside and throughout the community all throughout the summer. And we've been transferring some of that to virtual live stream, pre-recorded and live stream. We've also experimented with this idea of a drive-in music and movies series, which we launched last month. Has been very popular. And we have a handful more events where we'll be partnering with the Ballet and hopefully the Symphony at some point to show a film along with a feature of music from local artists that kind of opens the evening. This is jumping ahead to the racial injustice question. We've also been talking about programming that we can put out and celebrate and highlight immediately that amplifies Black and Brown voices in the performing arts, that speaks to social justice issues. And we're really now thinking very strategically about how we at the Marcus Center will help the county, who has identified racism as a public health crisis, how we're going to contribute to being a solution to that problem, and really challenging the team at the Marcus Center, our staff and board, to think about what are we going to specifically do. Jacobo is one of our fantastic board members and also has been a good guide in a lot of community engagement discussions about what we're going to do to contribute to that. So that's basically where we've been. And then I'm sure we'll circle back to the when will we reopen question.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Kendra. Mark, what's happening at the MSO? Or what was happening?
What isn't happening at the MSO? How about that one? Kendra referred to our last performance, which was for an audience of 0. We had the concert completely rehearsed. I'm sorry, an audience of, well, were you in the audience, Kendra? Okay, so there, in a hall that seats 2,300 people, there were 4 people in the audience. How's that? There was a really an emotional evening for us because we had never done anything like that. We created a live broadcast that was not dissimilar from something that would have been done in the 40s or the 50s, where the family gathers around the radio and listens to a live broadcast of an orchestra. I mean, the Toscanini did that with the NBC Symphony back in the day, so it was a very throwback experience. But since then, we're fortunate that we have an incredible archive of audio recordings that we have had on the WFMT radio broadcast network for 50 years. So what Ken David Mazur, our new music director, who only was with us for the beginning of the season, but it was his first season, which was ended early, he's been basically combing through the archives and putting together new concerts of old performances. So he will take an overture from one concert, another piece, and reframing them in very interesting ways, and then hosting the sort of the podcast. And the podcast, or the hosting, is very much of the time. We're talking about COVID, we're talking about racial injustices and diversity and inclusion, and we're doing that through the lens of the art that we use. So the pieces are picked on purpose to fit the story and the narrative of today, which is one of the great things about the art that we all live in, is that if it's good, it's timeless. and it will speak to everyone, or at least a lot of people, about the issues that they face, and they can process what they're processing today through the lens of art that someone may have made. They may have made it today. They may have made it centuries ago. But we're also very lucky in the sense that we have a new building that's 80 to 90% done at this point, and there is a fantastic interest, and I'm sure Michael has exactly the same thing with their new building. There's a fantastic interest in the community to see what it's like inside, how we're going to be different, and how we're going to engage with the world. And the interesting question that I keep being faced with, and I haven't found exactly the right answer yet, is how will we look different when we come back, when it comes to the two main topics that you talked about today, Mark, when it comes to what does a post-COVID concert experience look like, and what does a more inclusive and more equal programming and concert experience look like for all of us. And I could take shots at both of those right now, trying to do an answer, but really the thing that has become, I had I don't want to make it about me, but I'm going to talk personally for a second. I had the great gift of becoming an executive director of a large organization, knowing nothing. I came from the stage. I had managed nothing. So I had to learn, and I had to rely on smart people and experienced people to help me develop a vision for the organization. And I feel I'm going to do exactly the same thing when it comes to the EDI work, the equity, diversity, inclusion work. Is I'm going to come from a place where I know nothing. I'm not an expert. I'm not one of the affected communities. So my ears are wide open, and our organization is learning. And from that learning, we will do great work, and great work for everyone. And that's really the position that I'm taking right now. And and as you all know, when it comes to that type of work, there's, you have 20% of your family is really interested in this and is fired up and absolutely wants to be involved. Then you got about 60% that's like, well, okay, if that's what we're going to do now, we can do that. I'm not opposed, but I'm not going to march. And then you have another 20% that's really not interested and thinks this is a fool's errand or you're blah, blah, blah. So our work is to help reinforce the 20% up here and help them convert the 60% and then forget about that lower 20%. Like, we're not going to change them. They're going to be how they are. And that's essentially where we are in that space, is expanding the knowledge base, expanding the thoughtfulness, and changing our actions so that we become a much more inclusive organization.
Good. Well, we'll try and dive into that a little bit more. I'm mindful of time here. Michael, take us through the ballet's journey from closure to now.
Okay, yeah, so we were in the midst of our 50th anniversary. We were also experiencing our wonderful new building. We moved into it 1st of August last year, so we're still shy of 1 year in our building. We were 2 weeks away from producing 3 works, 2 world premieres and 1 work we'd done before. So the moment that this hit and we realized we needed to try and have some options, we of course looked at all the scenarios of could we bring this program into our new location, the Baumgartner Center for Dance. The answer was yes. But literally, just to give an idea of how quickly this evolved, no sooner had we begun the process of planning and looking and seeing how to do this, then it changed again, and then suddenly we're into March, and we had no choice but to close. It's been an interesting ride. Obviously, the PPP allowed us to keep our dancers fully engaged, and that allowed us to create a lot of specific online and social media ideas and creative ideas, very much the same as the rest of the globe. It was interesting just sitting back and looking at what some of the major companies around the world were producing. So from a slightly indulgent standpoint, it's been wonderful to just spend time looking at that and reminding ourselves of the incredible talent across all platforms, or not just dance, that is out there. Personally, we've spent a lot of time looking at the National Theatre Live, just a chance to get to see those productions we never get to see. So we've spent a lot of time obviously focusing on the could we continue with the season? Peter Pan was going to be our big season finale. It was fairly obvious that wasn't going to happen. So again, trying to move through that process thoughtfully, but without using unnecessary resources, time, energy, and hope. We just decided to face what we perceived as the reality, which of course has now become the reality. We've spent a lot of time with our health and safety. We put together a health and safety committee because one of the things that we feel is a slight advantage to us is the fact that we have this incredible school. So we can hopefully focus on getting our students fully engaged. So we went immediately online with great success. Most students wanted to continue doing their ballet studies from their living rooms. The company were taking a class every day, and my faculty, we were all taking turns in communicating the class from our homes to them. And again, you could also connect with teachers from around the world who are offering the same service. Our health and safety committee has gotten to a point now where next week, we will actually have 85 students in person in our building, adhering to very strict health and safety rules for a month, and this will be our summer intensive. We have 6 faculty members, and there'll be 15 students in each room, and they'll stay with the same teacher. And the entire building, to Mark's point, the building was built for this. It is absolutely state-of-the-art clean. We don't need to upgrade HVAC systems. The cleaning of the building is somewhat easy, and there are no areas in our building where we have traffic issues, so we can adhere to social distancing in and out of the building. We're doing everything that we need to do. So it's going to become a test model for the school returning in September. And if we can get our school back operating, still with a hybrid mixture of online and in person, that will not only continue to create optimism and energy within the building and the organization, it will give us the confidence to see how to make sure we can keep our staff and our students and our employees safe. And the goal then, I think, as with most of us, is, let's finish with 2020. Let's look to the new year and make the new year the true new year, and try and see if we can really begin to return to our audience. And we're looking, we've been working with a local company, Mindpool, who are doing an awful lot of successful streaming. We've been working with Kendra and the BAC to see how can we, again, do a hybrid of live streaming, pay-per-view streaming, and in-person performances, just as an option to regrow our audience. At the same time as being mindful that we don't want that to become the new norm. We want people to be back in the theatre, and I'm very optimistic that after this, 2 things will happen. We will definitely see people desperate to get back into the theatre and get out of their homes. And secondly, as always, when we've had things forcibly taken away from us and we get them back, suddenly we appreciate them even more. So I'm hoping that all of our donors, all of our audience, all of our employees, everybody will just take a second to reflect on just exactly how valuable our arts contributions to this city and to mankind really are. And we can talk more about the DEI when we get into that.
So as listen, you got a load of arts leaders in the room, and we could fill hours of conversation. I think probably what is coming out of this conversation is like how some of the 2 major challenges that we have ahead of us, coming back in live performance. Most of what we do involves a lot of people gathering together, not just in the audience, but also performers. Mark, I know you're a trumpet player, and I read somewhere that droplets from a trumpet can go, singing can be 20 feet. I would imagine a trumpet could probably be 30, 40 feet or more. I don't know. How do we deal with those things that we've never had to embrace before? Just about, and performers, we're dealing, in our case, a lot with equity. We mostly we're a law theater, and so we employ equity actors. We have a non-equity portion of that's usually taken up by our EPRs, our emerging professional residents that we source from university programs, and just so the logistics of pulling people in. as I think about it, Singers, the Broadway series, how does getting the Broadway series up and running, getting dancers, contact with people. We've been exploring here what are plays we can do that are completely socially distanced, that could actually still give great experiences as we come out, because what we don't know is that when we can come back and pick up things as normal. I guess that's going to be when there's sufficient confidence in medicine, or the pandemic, dying down, sufficiently herd immunity, or whatever we have. It seems to me that the challenges we have now, as we plan, as we don't know when schools are coming back, as we don't know when the pandemic will stop spiking, as soon as we think it's under control in one area. We've seen states reopening. We've seen spikes. There's a different correlation there. There seems to be a polarizing issue about about wearing a mask in public or not when you go grocery shopping. It seems to be the most ridiculous political thing I've ever heard of, but it's sort of hardly surprising right now, given how polarized the nation is. And then as we come back to work amidst all of those challenges in the live arts, then looking at everything through the EDI lens that is inextricable from how we program, how we staff. And I think as organizations, we're all in different phases of that, and we've got different plans in place, and some of them are still being formulated because they're requiring, as Mark suggested, some radical rethinking. Go on.
Can I reframe something you just said, or
sure.
Additionally frame? I think they're the same thing. Wearing a mask and EDI is the same germ. It's about what's best for everybody. It's not about you and what you think and what your feelings are about your bubble. It's what's best for everybody. And if we can become less selfish and less inward looking and think about why we're doing what we're doing, and it's not just about us. One of the things that we struggle with in our organization right now is we have a lot of artists at home who don't have anything to do, and they want to bring value. And sometimes they want to make a video of themselves doing something in their living room. That's great, but that's really about them. I mean, and maybe their grandparents may enjoy watching it, and some of their friends, but it's not incredibly compelling. I'm not saying I'm not insulting. I'm saying that's just what it is. I've seen some really compelling things videotaped in people's living rooms, but that's not what we do. But what are we going to turn ourselves around after this? You don't wear a mask for yourself. You wear the mask for other people, unless you're wearing an N95, right? So how are we going to turn it around and make it about them and not about us? And that's very difficult because as artists, we all spent our entire lives perfecting our craft, being about us, alone in a practice room, alone in a dance studio, or in a dance studio with only dancers, or in a singing studio with only singers. And it's very insular. And in order to become great at what we do, we had to be internally focused, and we had to be somewhat self-centered in a way. How do we flip that around now and open our world to all the people who aren't in our circle? And it's the same. I think this whole mask thing is essentially a totem for the whole deal. What are you willing to do, and what are you willing to change in your life to help someone else?
Other thoughts? Thank you. Other thoughts, Kendra?
I would love to, kind of circle back to this idea of, we talk about EDI, DEI. I'm on the board of Association of Performing Arts Professionals. We call it READY, where we prioritize race as part of that. And I think the situation that has sparked this outrage with George Floyd's murder is really about racial equity. I mean, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, but really what we're talking about is Black, Indigenous, Brown, people of color who have been systematically oppressed in this country since its founding. And it's really important for us as arts organizations to focus on, when we're talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, what we're really talking about. And it's been something that's been uncomfortable for us to talk about. Yes, we want to serve everyone. Yes, we do want to serve everyone. But what we really want to do is equalize the playing field for those specifically Black and brown people who have not been at the same table. And I think part of our conversations about this, at least in the conversations I've been having both locally with our government leaders and also nationally with my CEO colleagues, is that means providing a seat at the table in the artistic roles, in artistic leadership roles, in the CEO's roles, in the C-suite. So again, I don't want to minimize the everyone conversation, and that we want to be, our vision is a gathering place, for all at the Marcus Center. But really, George Floyd's murder has amplified the true injustice that is that has been happening for Black people in this country for 401 years. So I don't want to minimize that. I know in our work that is something that is very much coming to mind, and the hearing our county executive David Crowley, when I spoke with him, talk about racism as a public health crisis in Milwaukee affects all of us, whether we're in the arts, whether we're in social service, whether we're in corporate government work. We have to be doing something to address that, and this racial equity has to be prioritized. So I just wanted to give that, because it's something I'm really passionate about, and I know a lot of us on this call are as well, but it's something that needs to keep being said as a priority.
Jacobo, your thoughts?
Yeah, so, in Latino arts, we're mainly focused on Latino artists or Hispanic artists or people that work closely with the Hispanic community. So one of the things that I was reflecting on our previous programming, because I was thinking, wow, like we've been trying to push that envelope, like, or trying to create that equal playing field, and reflecting on our mission, which is kind of conserving cultural heritage, right, within the Latino community. But that's only half of it. The other half of that is building cultural bridges to invite others, other neighboring communities, to get to know the Latino community, especially. If we're looking at the last 4 years, we're coming from a period where the Hispanic community on a national platform has been vilified, and completely disparaged by, like a lot of the politicians at a national level. And now we roll right into 2020 and everything that's been going on with the atrocious, like the horrific murder of George Floyd. And then it's kind of bubbled this, the civil rights movement that's currently unfolding. So I'm thinking back to some of the programming that we've been doing, and is it enough? And the answer is obviously no. It's like we need to do more, and we need to be very focused on what we've been doing. We have a series here called Lunch and Learn, where we have moderated panel discussions on different topics that are art-based but relevant to the community. And we had one that was titled "The Drums and Latin Rhythms and Drums of the African Diaspora," and we're looking at the cultural traditions of that come from Africa and have been part of the diaspora that have formed, a great part of the Latin American and Caribbean musical traditions and dance traditions. And we were so honored to have like the founding, Fern Cochler, who's the founder of Kothi, be on that panel. And one of the things that she said during that panel discussion, just absolutely broke my heart. And it was like, this was the first time that she's participated in a panel discussion that's looking at Black and Brown and how much of the shared cultural heritage, informs each other. And how ridiculous is that? For Kothi, it's an organization that's existed for 50 years in Milwaukee. And here I come along and have say, hey, let's have a panel discussion. And this is the first time it's ever happened in Milwaukee. That's ridiculous. So, and it's, I think, all of us to really look at what kind of programming that we've been putting out as, leaders for our organizations, and look how we can improve on that. And, and the onus is on me right now. It's like, okay, how am I going to move forward? How can I take that and make it better and make those bridges that we are looking to build, make them more solid? Think of the Three Little Pigs, like I built a straw bridge. Now I need to build a wood bridge, and I need to be working towards building a brick bridge, because there is a big bad wolf and it's trying to blow it down. And that big bad wolf is systematic racism, and it's very real. And I think it's that moment of reflection that we are having right now, and it needs to turn into action. So I'm looking to the programming that we're preparing for the fall, and we're looking at another lunch and learn on murals. Murals have been enjoying a resurgence, a renaissance in the last few years within the national art scene, but also in Milwaukee. But if we look at all the different murals that have started to pop up all throughout the city because of the Black Lives Matter movement and everything else that's happened on the periphery of that, that is a community voice. And what is the function that they serve? So I'm working on developing a panel of key stakeholders within that movement that can lend their voice to further that conversation. And as an organization, it's funny because as a nonprofit, let's be honest, we all try to stay apolitical. And because we're looking at funding sources, right? But at the same time, we have a responsibility to the communities we serve. And we have to be very honest with ourselves and how we're going to navigate that terrain. Because from a personal perspective, we feel very passionate about things. Well, then how do we turn that into the work that we do while being respectful to this amazing organizations that we've been given the privilege to navigate? Because Latino Arts was here before me. I want to make sure that it's here after me, and that's something that I have to weigh between the programming that is needed within the community and then also what we're going to be putting out and to ensure that it continues to exist after I'm done.
I think you framed up a lot of things there, what the challenges.
Sorry, I tend to ramble.
No, but I think you framed that up Jacobo, really well in terms of what the challenges are. Often we see arts organizations, if you think about the Me Too movement, the entertainment industry, the arts movements were very active in that, very vocal in that. We're seeing that now. I'm really interested to see, as we do our work, we put in the work, we take the note, we create meaningful action behind the words and the stances that we make. And I'm really interested to see how that works in the corporate world, where that lens is shine, and maybe that's part of our job as well, to help shine a lens on that world, because that world operates to a different standard and a different level of accountability because of the wealth attached to it. So I think that's going to be an interesting challenge, and how we as arts organizations interface with that. As I look at the clock, this has been a brilliant conversation, and I wish we could just keep going. We've got about enough time. I think I'd love to think about give just one soundbite from all of you, just on before we sign off, on what are you feeling positive about for the future? What is your hope? Because really, we're involved in the arts. That's what we do. We have to keep hope at the forefront of where we're heading. What does that look like for you and your organizations? Michael.
That's a tricky question. I mean, I certainly, and I just say, I mean, everything that Kendra and Jacobo was saying is exactly kind of where the Ballet is doing. You always think you're doing enough until you realize you're not doing anywhere near enough. And because we tend to live in the fast lane, trying to bounce from one thing to the next, that we never spend enough time to celebrate what we have done. We're too worried about keeping the lights on and moving forward. So I think in terms of positive for the Ballet, it really is that the desire for people to want to have dance of all forms as a part of our community feels very strong to me, and we see that through the donations, through the commitment from parents and dancers and students, that again, I think we have to grow. We have a responsibility to grow from this. And to the point, when I came to this organization 18 years ago, it wasn't in very good shape. I'm sure as hell not going to leave it in any worse shape than that. It's got to come back to be the power that it was and share its place with all of us in our community. So I'm feeling very positive that, again, we are the arts. We're a powerful force. We will survive and we will grow, and we'll all learn from this.
Thank you. Maggey.
Well, I have to say, crisis creates innovation, and that can be painful, and it's not necessarily a fun process, but it does push all of us towards change. And I don't think it's surprising that the pandemic, overlaid with George Floyd's murder and everything else that's gone on, has created such a massive level of crisis for all of our organizations and our city that we are moving towards change because we have to. And just to build on what Mark and Jacobo and Kendra have said, there are people who are not ready to have the conversation. There are great conversations happening, but they need to move towards action. And, as an organization, I have been very heartened by seeing the reaction to our anti-racism action plan. We've had such support where I did anticipate quite a bit of pushback, and finding those ways to identify the first steps forward in a project that is scope creep. I think the minute you're addressing anything of this scale, it's so hard to even figure out what your first few Legos are going to be. That I've been really excited to see how quickly that has moved forward for us in our organization, and frankly in the arts community at large. I think we're all ready to really step into this and see progress and build progress and lead progress. And for us, we have a show next year that is really focused on this for us, on how do we merge the beauty of the art scene in Milwaukee, coming from more of the Black and Brown community, and then curating who we bring in to be part of that as well in our Bohème, which will be in May, assuming we can get the pandemic under control. And I'm just really excited to have that tailwind of these conversations, which are coming out of awful experiences, but that we do have enthusiasm for, we have excitement for in our donors, in our audience, in our community, and really re-envisioning what opera looks like without changing what opera is. So I think this is, really making lemonade. There's a lot of lemonade getting made, and it's not just ours. Everyone on here, as I hear what you're doing, it's really exciting. So I can't say the pandemic is welcome. I can't say the racial equity crisis is welcome, but it is certainly something we could have dealt with sooner. And we will have a better world when we're done with it, because we're all going to demand it. I think it's that simple. So that, as a mother of a multicultural family in particular, gives me a lot of hope, because I plan on not only leaving the opera company strong, but also this city stronger, so that as my kids are going to all of these organizations, are going through our school systems, that we have a city we can all be proud of.
Thank you. Kendra.
I'm super excited about the response we've been getting from audience members about how incredibly excited they are to come back to live performance. I think we've all been hearing that as we've been surveying. We're running a survey every 2 weeks now through several different organizations, and hearing from audience members that they want to come back. So when we can come back, I think we can, as Michael had said, I feel like there's going to be a lot of excitement for that. The other thing I'm really optimistic about is how a number of anchor institutions, both here in Milwaukee and around the country, are really actively, vocally expressing a need to advance racial equity, specifically racial equity in their organizations. And that is something I don't think I've ever heard in my 23 years in this business. And whether it's just a statement supporting Black Lives Matter, or an actual action plan, as Maggey has described for the opera. I am a member of the Broadway League and involved in their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and hearing their move in a very traditionally white, male-dominated organization towards racial equity it's really it's different this time. I really feel it's different this time. And I'm also super enthusiastic, again, to get political, Jacobo, I'm super enthusiastic about our city and county leadership right now. I sat on a webinar last week with our new county executive, our county board chair, and the president of Common Council, all young Black and Brown individuals in their 30s leading our city and county, again, identifying racism as a public health crisis. I mean, the future is bright for us. So Milwaukee's a great place. I'm excited to be here, and I'm also excited to have you all as friends. You've been a real, as I've said to Maggey, you all have been a real lifeline for me being new. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Kendra. And Kendra, we know that you have a very hard stop. There's an important call you got to get off. So if you hop off as we round this up, we thank you for your participation. Take your call, and I look forward to kind of us all being in the room. But if you need to go right now, we say thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Yeah. Mark, you got to unmute.
I know. There we go. So I think that it's funny. I think a lot of you have already mentioned what I would include in sort of a closing statement here, which is heartening that we're all so much on the same page. I think that in order for there to be real change, there has to be dissatisfaction. And what's happening in our country right now is the dissatisfaction is bubbling up, and I mean, just a roaring up. And I'm hoping that with that dissatisfaction, we will be able to create visions for newness that are accepted. And I think that where Kendra talked about, our audiences are craving the shared experience of being together and absorbing what we do. So are all of the Brewers fans and all the Packers fans and all the Bucks fans. This idea, even people who like to go out to eat, are all craving this gathering of humanity. And I think it is possible that because this is the hopeful statement, that because of the craving to go back, we can take more programming risks to address the more sort of diverse and inclusive repertoire that in the past we've shied away from because, well, maybe people won't like it, and it's not what we did last year, and we have to have another Beethoven festival because we know that'll work. So maybe we don't have to do a Beethoven festival now, and we can feel safe not doing that because people are so hungry for what we do, and we can be risk takers and feel safer taking the risks that need to be taken. So it's an odd. That's the hopefulness for me. If that makes sense.
Jacobo, take us home.
Oh boy, no pressure, right? No, I think Mark, I applaud that sentiment that taking risk in programming for sure. But I think the hopeful perspective for me is that seeing the youth and how active they are. And I think the seeds that are being laid and seeing that level of engagement from all different parts of the city moving towards a common goal. And it's something that it's so worthy of this much of attention. It's really, really inspiring. So my hope is that the motivation that is driving the youth to be engaged on a political and a social activism level is translates to a long haul. It won't fizzle out. It will continue on, and I will do my best through my work to continue to echo that in the type of programming that we are going to be producing coming up. And I think that's where I want to focus on, is that showing our community and all those engaged the amount of respect that they deserve for the effort that they are putting, so they feel validated and encouraged to keep moving forward.
Thank you. I'll just round up. I am hopeful and positive because of the conversations like this that we're having. I think there's an openness and a real intention to listen, to take the note, to accelerate processes that we've either been thinking about starting or we were in the middle of. And I think the hunger, I think what you've all said in some shape or form, I think is true. I think people are missing gathering. They're missing shaking hands. I mean, just you think of how time you last shook a hand, of somebody, had a hug with somebody, gathering in a place, whether it's a music concert, an opera, a symphony, a recital, a dance, a piece of theater, drama, whatever it is, just gatherings. I think we're missing those connections. We're not wired as human beings to not have that, and I think we're missing it. I think there is going to be a craving for us coming back, and when we come back, hopefully we as organizations will have created or will continue to create, and the work will never be done, kind of more inclusive, open places where those gatherings will be more equitable, and I think as a society we'll all be better for it. When I came to Milwaukee 10 years ago, I actually started. July 1st was my official starting day. So, as on June 30th, I finished 10 years here, and as I continue my journey here, it's like it's in the 11th season is looking very different to how we all envisaged it. But I think actually through this trauma, through this need for change, I think we'll come out stronger as human beings. We'll come out stronger as leaders. I think we'll come out stronger as a community. And I think, Milwaukee, as we know, is a fantastic place to live, but it hasn't been a fantastic place for a lot of people to live for a very long time as well. And I think it's not even an option to opt in or out. I think it will be addressed. It has to be addressed. And I think we'll all be better for it. And I do feel positive by the organizations we have and you as leaders behind those operations and where we're heading, and the people that we are now gathering and bringing to the table to help us make the right and the best choices. I think we're moving in the right direction. It's a long haul. I'm not even sure if it's going to happen in our lifetimes or even maybe our kids. It's a long haul. And I think defining those expectations and taking joy in individual achievements as we go, and they're not going to be fast enough for some people or comfortable. But I think we're starting to move in the right direction, and that's where I stay positive, and I have to believe in that, and I'm glad that we're all part of that. So thank you for your time this morning and sharing a cup of coffee and tea, if you had it, with us. And I look forward to kind of being at all of your opening nights and you at ours, and being in big gathering places again and doing what we do best. So I thank you.
Mark, so thank you for the invitation. I just wanted to remind everybody, please wear your masks. It's very important. Always wear your mask in public.
Thank you.